Hope more people show up. Basically, there was no homework for this week, as you all know, unless nobody gave me an unwanted homework. So the plan for today is that we're just going to go over the topics that the homework due on Sunday is going to be about. There is going to be a homework for Sunday. And the homework this week is going to be basically up to this point. There's been there's been two types of homework questions. Most of them have just been like individual problems that I wanted particular answers to. And then at the end, I stuck on a find me an example of blah, blah, blah. And that one was always worth a few points. However, this week, it's all going to be the find me an example of blah, blah, blahs. So it's just going to be 4 questions in which I ask you to find me. Well, it's just going to be find me 4 instances of advertisements in which social psychology principles are employed, and then just explain to me how they're employed. So basically, if you do the assignment, you will get full credit, more or less, unless you're like totally off the mark. But just about everyone gets full credit on those big 25 pointers. So it's basically just going to be, again, 4 questions of find me 4 examples of social psychology principles in action in advertising. So the way to think of the class today is basically a how not to get tricked by advertising class. So that's the background. And as I go through each of these, I will be highlighting what sorts of things, what sorts of advertisements would involve each of these social psychology principles, or these ways that we think that get employed in advertisements to manipulate us. All right, so these are key terms. And what we're going to do today is literally just go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 key terms. So first off, what is social psychology? Everything we're talking about today is just going to be talking about things that are part of social psychology. So what is social psychology? Anyone know? Or what is social, or what is psychology?
Interactions with people.
Yeah, so that's social is a matter of interactions with people. So if somebody's very social, they like interacting with people, they're very interactive. So that's what we mean by social. Then what's psychology?
The study of the brain.
Yes, the study of the mind, the study of the brain. So basically what social psychology is the influence that other people have on the way our mind processes. So instead of just like last week, we were doing psychology of the individual type. So we were just looking at various heuristics we follow to like the heuristics that govern our brain power on our own as we operate by ourselves. And so we're just talking about the ways in which we make mistakes about small sample size and that thing. Today, we're going to talk about how the decisions we make and the conclusions we draw are greatly affected by what other people around us do. And that's all that social psychology is. It's a study of the principles by which other people affect our behaviors and the ways in which our behaviors are influenced by other people and other people's behaviors. So what we're going to talk about today is background is that in this class, as we've said, we're just trying to figure out how to think clearly, how to reach good conclusions in our lives, how to get to the answers we want in our everyday interactions, our everyday drawing of conclusions. However, sometimes it goes wrong. And last time we looked at interactions in which our own thinking processes can lead us astray. Today, we're going to look at cases in which our thinking is drawn astray because of all these principles, all these psychological factors of how other people will influence us. So that's the whole background, is how do other people and their behaviors influence our behaviors and get us to do things that might not end up being in our best interest. And if our goal is to do things that are best for us, we need to know what these factors are so we can work against them. Does everyone understand the general picture? We on board? Okay. All right. So that's the first one. Now the halo effect. I can never remember which class I talked about the halo effect in already. I did in one of my classes. Anyone know what the halo effect is? Either because I mentioned it or you can reason it out.
Is that a false perception of like good?
That's exactly it. The idea is that what ends up happening, what is a halo in like a painting or like an angel's halo? Well, a halo is a thing that emits light and makes everything else around it brighter. So the halo effect is a case in which one good quality or one positive thing ends up causing us to look more positively on other things, even though they shouldn't influence our decision. So a classic case is, as a matter of fact, we are generally more likely to believe things that are said by pretty people. That's just a matter of fact about human psychology. If you are presented with an argument exactly the same way, only a pretty person gives it to you, you're more likely to believe it than if an ugly person gives it to you. And that is just a fact about how human beings work. And the reason why, I mean, you can counteract this and be like, oh, the only reason I'm feeling positive is because this person is attractive. But you have to actively work against that. And the general reason why is just the way our mind works. Whenever you're like, our emotions kind of run on a scale from positive to negative. So, you know, you can be really sad or really angry, and then really positive, you're happy, you're cheerful, things seem good. Well, all the good ones and all the bad ones together, they affect your thinking on the whole. So if you're in a really good mood, things look cheerier, you're happier. So in this case, if you're looking at someone who's very attractive, it puts you in a better mood and makes you more likely to think that what they're saying is good. So in classic cases, like very often when you think of like manipulative people as movie characters, they're generally like, there's this trope of the attractive person who can get away with what they want. Like there's the like smooth talker, the smooth dresser of either gender. And so that's the case of the halo effect, is you are just, as a matter of fact, more likely to accept things said by pretty people. And just like in terms of the numbers themselves, they've done experiments on this stuff. It's not just like I mean, I'm sure we can all think of cases in our own life where we behaved in a way in which we gave more attention or more effort to someone because we were attracted to them. And it's just an unfortunate fact that that someone's attractive does not determine whether what they're saying is true or false, but we unfortunately, we get manipulated in this way. So just some actual numbers. They did a study in which they looked at Canadian politicians and they asked people, is this politician attractive or is this politician not attractive? And they found that the attractive ones were 2.5 times as likely to win their election. Another one is they've looked at sentencing in Pennsylvania state jails. And basically they first asked people do you think this criminal is attractive or do you think this criminal is unattractive? And by and large, the attractive, or their words were the handsome men, got shorter sentences. Finally, there was one, this was more of those are just observations. Those are correlation doesn't equal causation. There could be something else. But in a lab setting, what they did is they gave people subjects were asked, they were just given a situation in which one person was negligent, you have an owner of a business, negligent, and this was the owner, and then over here, there was the injured party. So basically, this person did something wrong, this person got injured, and they asked people, how much money should the negligent person have to pay to the injured person? And this experiment was carried out a while ago, so the money numbers are different than they would be now. But basically, they found that if the negligent person was uglier than the injured person, or actually no, if the negligent person was, let's say, better looking than the injured person, then they felt the person should be paid, it was $5,623. So if a better looking person was responsible for the injury to a bad looking person, it was 5.6K. If, however, the person who was injured was the attractive one, so if you have I'll just put pretty person injured by an ugly person, anyone have a guess for how much money subject said the person should owe the pretty person?
10K?
Yeah, that's exactly it, 10K. It was about double the amount. So basically, people without realizing it were saying that, oh, better looking person, injured ugly person, well, the ugly person only deserves 5.6. Ugly person injures pretty person, that pretty person deserves 10. Interestingly, if you ask these subjects, did the attractiveness of the people have any impact on your decision? What do you think they said?
Say no.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Nick. The average person, if you ask someone, they're going to say, no, it had absolutely nothing to do with my decision. But if you actually look at how people behave, it seems like it does affect their decision. So this is a case in which this is the halo effect in action. The halo effect is a way in which putting someone in a good mood or giving somebody a positive thing makes you more likely to assume other positive characteristics. If they're pretty, you generally are going to think they're smart, or that they're funnier, or that all of these sorts of things. So another case of this, why are some advertisements funny? What is the point of, like, Super Bowl ads very often are just trying to be funny. They're not trying to inform you about the product. They're just saying, here's a funny thing. Here's our product. No relation. Jeffrey.
More likable, probably.
Yeah, it's more likable, but it's a similar sort of thing where it puts you as the viewer in a good mood. It makes you laugh. It makes you think more positively of them. So in this case, it's the same sort of idea of, we're going to, instead of giving you, in a case in which they're just making you laugh, instead of giving you an attractive person to put you in a good mood, they make you laugh to put you in a good mood, because laughter is actually incredibly good for you. It releases a lot of endorphins. It puts you in a good mood. So if you can make your audience laugh, then it doesn't matter whether the laughter has anything to do with your product. All that matters is that person laughed, that put them in a good mood, which made them more positively inclined towards your product. So if you have a really boring potato chip commercial that gives all the facts, and a funny potato chip commercial that has nothing to do with potato chips, like the Super Bowl ad where they put Lil Nas X on a horse dancing around, like that had nothing to do with Doritos, but it was way funnier than like a list of the Doritos ingredients. So all of a sudden people are like, oh, I'm in a good mood, I'll buy Doritos. That's the way that this advertisement works. So for the homework assignment, for those of you who came in late, the homework assignment this weekend is just going to be a case in which I ask you to find 4 advertisements. They can be video, written, or printed picture based. And I'm just going to ask you, look at these advertisements and tell me what social psychology principles are being used by the advertiser to get you to buy a product, to make you more likely to buy the product than they would be in other ways. And so a halo effect one is if the ad is trying to put you in a good mood, either by putting an attractive person in the photo, or by putting a puppy in the photo, or by making you laugh and think it's funny. Those would all be instances of the halo effect being used to get you to buy a product. So if this was the homework, it would be like, this photo is of diapers with a baby doing something silly. This is an instance of using the halo effect, because the halo effect, because the picture of a cute baby puts you in a good mood and therefore makes you more likely to buy the product. And yeah, if you put kids and dogs in the photo, it's even going to be more effective. So that's what we're talking about with the halo effect. And you can come up, this also explains one of the reasons, one thing you can think of with these effects is they help explain some of the fallacies from other weeks. So you can think of the fallacies as bad reasoning, and like they're not likely to get you the truth. And these social psychology effects help explain why those fallacies are like things we fall for. Why is it that we listen to celebrities who know nothing about the product? Well, very often the celebrity is a very attractive person who puts us in a good mood when we see them. So that's what we're talking about with the halo effect. Everyone on board with halo effect? It's pretty straightforward.
Yes.
We all have dealt with it in our everyday lives, I'm sure. And it's just an unfortunate fact. So the way to avoid falling prey to the halo effect is just know it's there and ask yourself, is the reason that I think this is a really good idea because the person telling me to do it is a very attractive person? Or is it because this is actually a good idea? So that's just basically to avoid falling prey to this stuff, ask yourself these questions. All right, that's the first one. Now, in-group versus out-group. How many people have heard these expressions before, in-group and out-group?
I don't.
Anyone have an idea what they mean in this case? What would it be to be an in-group? as opposed to an out group?
Compared to how you act out of a group, probably?
So it's similar. I actually worded that poorly, but the idea is that in-group members, it's not that you are in a group. It's rather these are members of your in-group as opposed to members of the out-group. So in that case, what would it be to be members of your in-group? Anyone have any ideas?
Like friends?
Yeah, friends. It's basically anyone who is in a group that you are a part of or you identify as. So for those of us who, you know, if we were in person and I knew where everyone was because you'd be in a classroom with me, one of our in-groups would be Baruch College, like Baruch community members. Another one would generally be New Yorkers. Another one is like in-group is your family. Another one is just anytime it's a group that you identify as a member of. And on the flip side then, an out-group is anyone who's not part of that in-group. So if you're a Democrat, your in-group relative to your politics is the Democratic Party. If you're an independent, your in-group is no party. If you're a Republican, your in-group is the Republican Party. And then the out-group is going to be everybody else. So that's what we mean by in-group and out-group. Now, just as a matter of fact, here's something about human beings. I'll pose it as a question. Do we prefer other in-group members? Do we prefer out-group members? Or do we feel the same about both groups?
Well, I think we feel more comfortable with in-group members.
Yeah, Jessica's exactly right. Generally, we have positive feelings towards our in-group simply because they are in-group members. So the clearest example of this is sports fans. Sports fans are all, from the outside, equally crazy. And I say this as a sports fan. Rooting for a sports team is one of the least rational things you can do. It makes no sense. It's unclear what you're rooting for. But if you find out somebody likes the same team you like, you automatically feel some sort of positive feeling towards them. And on the flip side, when you find out somebody likes a different team, generally, what do you feel about this other person?
No commonality.
Yeah, you either feel no commonality, or it's like, in an extreme case, like you ask a Yankees fan what they think about Red Sox fans, and it's not like, oh, they're just another group. It's, violent feelings towards them. Sports fans fight because the in-group members identify very strongly and think the out-group are in some sense bad or terrible, when in truth, you just have two different groups of people who are equally obsessed with a game. Gloria.
So then it would be like a rivalry.
Yeah.
Instantly.
So the reason, at the end of the day, Yankees fans and Red Sox fans have so much in common. They both spend an inordinate amount of time watching men in tight pants hit a little white ball with a wooden stick. They are basically in most ways very similar. And yet because they define our in-group is Yankees fans, New Yorkers, these are my people, I feel positively about them. While those fans are the out-group, they are the other people. It also comes up a lot, you can think about religious conflicts. When people believe in different religions, it's not just oh, they have a different view. It's no, our group is the right way, that group is the wrong way, and we're going to fight many wars about it. That's what we're talking about in terms of in-group versus out-group. So in-group is just people who are part of a group with you. Now, because of this simple fact that we prefer in-group members, it's very easy to use this fact against people to get them to do things that you want them to do. How can you manipulate someone by employing this in-group, out-group preference? How many people have bought a car or a mattress or something, a big TV where you went to the store and you had to interact with a salesperson who was trying to sell you the thing? I know these days, most of us just buy stuff online, but how many of you have had that fun experience of going and talking to the person?
Yeah, so they try to convince you, right, into buying something.
And generally, they don't just sit back and be like, okay, yeah, that's a mattress, or yep, that's a car. What do they try to do? What are some of the approaches that
they make it the best thing in the world, so you want to buy it.
They make it the best thing, but also they very often do what? Are they like, oh yeah, I'm not, you're nothing like me. Like, I don't know you. Like, I'm selling, you're buying. We're nothing like each other.
They try to seem more relatable to you.
Yeah, they're trying to seem, that's exactly right. They're trying to seem more relatable to you. So what do? They say things like, if you're looking at this minivan, they'll be like, I also have 3 kids. And let me just tell you, this minivan is perfect for my family. Or like, oh, you grew up outside of Philadelphia? I grew up outside of Philadelphia. Where are you from? So what they're trying to do here is what? Well, they're trying to show you that you and them are in an in-group. And if you are members of the same in-group, then what they're saying will automatically seem better to you. So if you have somebody who seems totally distinct from you and they're telling you something, you're going to be less likely to believe it. So what is the salesperson going to do? Try to make you think that you're members of the in-group. So a good car salesperson is going to try to play up all the ways you're similar, might even lie about what their own life is like. They might not be married, but they might say, well, my wife loves this. Or yes, when I got married, and try to make you feel like you and them have something in common so that therefore you have because you start treating them as an in-group member, you have a preference towards them. So another way of doing this sort of, give me one second. I just lost my train of thought. In-group preference, sometimes your brain is just like, nah, I'm done. No, so in-group, out-group preference is because we have these positive feelings towards somebody in our group. Another thing that this ends up doing is, oh, I remember where I was going. Rewind a second. Anyone know why there's an in-group bias? What the reason is that we prefer in-group members to out-group members? It's built into our psychology. Does anyone know the historical reasons for this? There are a couple different ones that combine.
No, I don't know. Could it be evolution, something like that? Because it's always like
it's tied in with evolution. So here's the idea. Human beings, we used to all live in Africa, like our very distant ancestors, and we lived in little groupings out on the savannah. You know what else lives on the savannah in Africa?
Probably wild animals.
Yeah, there's things like, yeah, lions, elephants, things that are bigger, stronger, and can eat you. So how do you survive out there?
By grouping yourself with more human beings.
Yeah, the only reason we are alive is because we were able to coordinate and work together. You put one human alone in the wilderness, it's dead. We don't have sharp claws. We don't have big teeth. We've got big brains, and our big brains allow us to work together. So out there on the plains to survive, we needed to work with people who we lived with and work together. Because if you didn't work together, then you were going to all die. So instead, we have this built-in thing to treat members of our in-group positively, so we're more inclined to work together with them. And if you work together with them, then you're more likely to live and survive out on the wild savannah, where otherwise you're going to get eaten by a lion. Basically, we like in-group members because back in the thousands of years ago in our ancient ancestors, having a preference toward in-group members kept us from being eaten by lions. The problem is these days, we're no longer very often in threat of being eaten by lions. Instead, we're in threat of other human beings using this preference against us to get us to do things that we don't usually like. So another way in which in-group, out-group preference manifests is in things like, generally, you are more likely to purchase things from people who look like you and dress like you. If a salesperson dresses nothing like you, you're very unlikely to feel a connection with them. If your teachers look nothing like you, it's very hard to connect with them. If they talk nothing like you, it's just generally harder the way we're wired. So very often, this leads to a lot of problems in with racism or sexism, or one of the reasons that it's so hard for people, to take a classic case, for women to get into computer science. Why is it so hard for women to get jobs in tech? Well, one of the reasons why it's so hard for women to get jobs in tech is because the people who are already in tech, without realizing it, have a preference for other people who look like them, and therefore are more likely to hire people who look like them. So that is one of the ways in which in-group preference, like back in the day when we lived with the lions, it worked really great. These days, though, it can a lot of times get in our way, and we need to pause and ask ourselves, like, wait, am I feeling a negative feeling towards this person because they have a bad argument, or just because they don't look like me? And you have to ask, if your goal is to get the right answer, you got to ask yourself, slow down and be like, wait, why am I feeling this way? So that's in-group, out-group. And that's like the biology behind it. And so if you're wondering, like, why on earth do I like, and the unfortunate fact is some of this stuff is so ingrained that it can be very, very difficult to kind of get yourself not to think in these ways. So what would be an example for talking about the homework? What would be an example of an in-group preference, like somebody manipulating our tendency to prefer in-group in an advertisement? How might an advertising company use this to get you to buy something you don't need? What might they say in the ad? Any guesses? You've definitely seen these 1,000 times.
Maybe things like cars, when they try to put a more exciting thing because they try to relate to you that you live a boring life.
Yeah, so that's one thing, is what they try to do. So one thing they can try to do is get you to think like, if you buy this car, you are going to become a member of the cool group. So one thing you can do with in-group preference is say like, this group is the cool. This group is the people who own this car, and also the people who own this car are cool. Don't you want to be a part of that cool in-group? Therefore, you should buy this car. So it's kind of manipulating the sense of like, you want to be a part of this. You want to join that cool in-group. Another way that it can be used is because we have a preference for people of a certain group, they will try to, instead of just having like some random person in the advertisement, they'll try to have somebody in your in-group advertising something. So a classic case is political ads. If Donald Trump is putting a political ad in New York State, who is he going to have in his advertisement saying you should vote for Trump? What sorts of people will he include?
Maybe someone whatever player from a sport that it's from New York, something like that.
Yeah, so exactly, it's going to be a New York player, or it might just be like a random person, but this random person is going to be like from the Bronx. You're not going to have somebody from like Louisville, Kentucky, who's like, yes, New Yorkers, vote for Trump. Like, that's not good advertising. Somebody from Louisville, Kentucky is not a member of your in-group, but a member of your in-group is somebody like, you know, if you're Trump and you're advertising in the Bronx, you're going to put people with Yankees hats who are saying vote Trump. You're not going to have some random out-group member. And so very often, like, if you are, why is it that one of the like most sought after groups of people that Trump has been trying to get at his rallies are people of color? Because if you see a person of color at the rally, if you're a person of color, your in-group preference kicks in. Well, if somebody is if somebody is a completely like white person from rural Kentucky and sees at a Biden rally all people of color, then this person is going to be like, well, that group, I don't identify with that group. I'm voting for the person whose rally is entirely white, even if they aren't necessarily thinking about it and it's not even operating at a conscious level. But that's how in-group preference works. So if you're anytime there's trying to get you to think like other people of your in-group think this way, therefore you should too. So that's in-group, out-group preference. Everyone on board with that one? Or I guess in-group preference, out-group dislike. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. The next one is, and actually I wrote these as 3, 4, and 5, but actually these 3 are kind of 3 sides of the same coin if you could have a 3-sided coin, which you can't, but if you could. What is conformity? What is it to conform?
To sell out, or to be a group of people
to agree with something?
Yeah, it's to agree, and sell out is actually a really good way of putting it. It's to go along with what some other group is doing to fit in. So if you sell out, you're like giving up what you were and going to become something new for some other purpose. So conformity would be if every single one of us say, loved the Yankees and hated the Red Sox, except for me. And all of you spent the entire time talking about how terrible the Red Sox were. And by the end of class, I'm like, you know what? You're right. I'm going to be a Yankees fan. That's conforming. So one thing about human beings is also we have an like an ingrained need to conform. And it's not all people feel it 100%, and we don't feel it for all things, but very often we will go out of our way to conform to fit in with what other people are doing, specifically people we care about or people whose opinions we value. And this ties in with the in-group, out-group preference, because back in the day, when we were all out on the savannah, if there's a lion around and you aren't with your group, you're gonna die. And if you are like the squeaky wheel who no one wants to be around, the first caveman to die was the most annoying caveman. Why? Because they kicked that caveman out of the group. That caveman was alone and that caveman got eaten. So there is this pressure to fit in so that nobody kicks you out. If you're unlike other people, if you are just like everyone else, you're not going to be singled out and kicked out of the group. So that's where this need to conform comes from, is the same sort of in-group pressure. However, in our everyday lives, what we see is this like incredible pull towards acting in a way that other people are acting. And the clearest way of bringing out the fact that this is a very strong psychological mechanism, oh, did I just get blurry? I think I just got blurry. There we go. Norms. What is a norm? How many of you have seen this phrase before? Jessica.
Sorry, to follow rules, no?
Yeah, so a norm is like this. So it's, if you're following the norms, you're following these rules, but they're not like written down rules like a law book. They're rather these unwritten rules that govern our society. And we are all following tons of them all the time. So for instance, what are some norms that we're all obeying right now?
We're all listening to you.
Yeah, you're either listening to me or you're not being rude. Like nobody is just like blasting Dr. Dre through their microphone while I'm trying to teach. Like that is not something that's happening right now. There's a norm of be polite. It's much easier when we're in person to like really show what the norms are. Holding the door for a person is a norm. That's a really good one, Daniel. So like, there's not a norm of when a stranger's coming up behind you, just slam the door in their face. That is not a norm. There's a norm of holding it, being polite. And basically most things tied around politeness, there's norms. And the interesting thing about norms is very often some of them serve purposes, but there are other ones where there are multiple equally good ways of doing it. So for instance, in this class, if we were in person and you had a question, what would you do?
Raise your hand.
You'd raise your hand. Now, generally, in most classes, people raise a hand like this, but like this would work just as well. This would probably work pretty well. Raising both hands would work just as well. And yet if somebody raised their hand like this, whenever they had a question, like they were on a roller coaster, what would you think about this person as a classmate?
That they're kind of weird.
Yeah, you'd think they're kind of weird. And if somebody else was like, no, you got to raise both hands in class, you'd probably be like, no, I don't want to do that. Why? What do you feel if you were the person who decided to start raising your hands like this? What would you feel?
Like you don't fit in.
Yeah, you have this literal feeling of kind of like, you kind of cringe at yourself. This feeling of like inside your gut, you feel embarrassed, you feel shame. And so why do you feel shame? Is it because there's anything actually like, and a matter of fact, is this in any way worse than this? No, these are like basically the same action. It doesn't really matter. Or like shaking hands. With COVID, we now bump elbows. But back in the day, if you like went to a business meeting and were like, hey, it's nice to meet you, and you bumped elbows, you'd feel like a total idiot. And the other person would judge you for it. Why? Because that's just not how you do it. And this is what norms are. They're these unwritten rules where what makes them so powerful is just the fact that we have this impulse to do what other people are doing to fit in. So if you ever want to know whether something's a norm, just see what happens inside of you if you break it. So like, there are some people who have really, and you can think about like some comedians, there's a lot of comedy in norm breaking. And if some people have very low like shame tolerance or like high tolerance to feel ashamed, or they don't really feel shame, you can get a major comedy career out of it. You just ask people totally inappropriate things, and as long as you keep it going, you can have a comedy career. So that's though the norms are a way of showing that conformity is something that really dominates and controls our life and is very, very powerful. So in the case of an advertisement, in which you're looking in which somebody's trying to exploit the fact that we're conforming to get us to buy something, anyone have any ideas about what sorts of things an ad might say to try to get you to conform? Or to like exploit the fact that you have this tendency to conform in order to get you to buy their product? So here's one that sometimes they'll go with, is a sort of, you don't want to be left out in the cold. Like that's very often, I feel like that's a car ad. Like I've heard that 1,000 times. Or like, you don't want to be the only one who doesn't have this. Or I feel like for kids like back to school, it's like, you don't want to be the only one whose son doesn't have a cool new Ninja Turtles backpack. Like that sort of thing, that is exploiting our desire to conform as a means of getting us to buy things we don't need.
Could it be like, for example, when they show you a suburb and you see that the neighbor got a new car. So you need to buy a new car.
That's a really, really good one. There's a sense in which like you need to fit in, or another one in which like you see every one of the neighbors has a new car. If you don't have it, you are the outsider and you feel this need to buy it. So a way of getting people to buy things is try to highlight how many other people have it and how left out you'll be if you don't have it. So I feel like new technology is often like this too. It's always like, buy the newest iPhone. You don't want to be left behind with the iPhone 4 when everyone else has the iPhone 26. That's a way in which you have to conform to fit in. You've got to be cool. If the newest model of shoes comes out, another one is things like, I feel like this is how, this is like the main design behind many sorts of video games that make a new one every year. So like the Madden NFL video game, every year they come out with a new video game that's basically the game from the year before, and yet people will pay the same amount. Why? Because you don't want to be the one person who's playing last year's game. So this is a case of conformity. And this is a case in which conformity is really powerful. And conformity is also why peer pressure is so damn powerful. Why is it that when somebody says you're the only one who's not doing it, that actually has power over you? Well, it's because being the only one who doesn't do it, we're biologically designed to think, oh no, that's not good. Oh no, that's not good. If everyone's doing blank, I should do blank too. So that's conformity. That's how it operates in these sorts of ways. And you can see how it can lead to some very bad things. Because if you have a lot of people doing a bad thing, then you end up doing something bad just to fit in. None of this is rocket science, but you can see the way it's like literally built into our brains from a very basic level. And like, because like rationally, there's nothing good about peer pressure. The fact that your peers say it doesn't mean it's true, doesn't mean you should do it. But it feels that way because you're literally biologically programmed to give in to peer pressure. All right. So that's the first 1, 2, 3, 4. All that's left is social proof and compliance. So social proof is very closely related to in-group preference and conformity. And what you can think of with social proof is it's not just doing it because you want to fit in or because you like other people who are like you and they believe it. It's rather that generally speaking, if a lot of people believe something, it's probably true. And in a lot of cases, and in most parts of our lives, that's true. So how many of you are sitting right now? Out of curiosity, how many of you are sitting? All right, so we've got some sitters, good. How many of you believe your chair is gonna hold you up right now? How many of you believe that most chairs are gonna keep holding you up right now? Yeah, and so if I were to ask you like, is this chair, which is totally normal, and I sat in yesterday, is it gonna hold me up? Most of you are going to be like, yeah, it's going to hold you up. Chairs hold you up. That's what they're for. So asking you all, should I sit in this chair? Is this chair going to hold me up? Is generally a good way of finding out if it's true. And the more people that believe something, generally, the more likely it is to be true. The problem is that, and this goes back to what we were talking about with fallacies. Why was it a bad idea to ask, if you want to get a good assumption about who's going to win the election, why is interviewing 100 people at a Biden rally a bad way of finding out who's going to win the election? What did we say? What fallacy was that? Anyone remember?
I think it was something about a wrong sample.
Authority?
Something like
So that one, it's not quite authority. Jeff's more along the lines. It's an unrepresentative sample. So if we are asking just 100 people, all of whom are Biden fans, who's going to win the election, they're all going to say Biden. That's just an unrepresentative sample. So in the same way, if you ask 1,000 people, but the 1,000 people you ask are going into this with a biased view, then very often asking 1,000 people is not a good way to get the answer. So for instance, if you ask 1,000, you know, like you're thinking, who should I elect for president? And you just happen to ask 1,000 people, but you ask 1,000 people in like the most, like you ask 1,000 people at a Black Lives Matter rally who you should vote for. You're going to get a very different answer than if you ask 1,000 people at a like pro-police rally. And so just getting what most people think is not a good way unless you're ensuring that it's not a biased sample. So one thing to keep in mind with social proof is it can be a useful way, but it can also lead you astray. But because it's a way of just generally the more people who believe it that you interact with, the more likely you are to believe it. This can also be exploited in a very similar way to in-group and out-group, or in-group preference and conformity. So in this case, if you just tell someone that a lot of people in their area believe something, then the idea is they're more likely to believe it as well. And so this is actually, social proof is one of the main reasons that conspiracy theories are able to get off the ground, especially in an online community. So why is it that the internet, since the internet was like really became popular and like a part of everyday life about 20 years, within the past 20 years, conspiracy theories have taken off, like just absolutely just blown up? And why is it? What's the reason that conspiracy theories are able to get off the ground so easily that ties in with social proof? So here's the, Jeff.
Maybe social media, people spread it around and more people start believing it. And once you see that people believe it, you think it's true.
That's exactly it. Because of social media, you can find a lot more people who believe it. And also, because of the nature of social media, you aren't going to find anybody who doesn't believe it, because the nature of the internet is such that you only go to places that you're interested in going to. Like I spend, like, this might surprise some of you, but I have never spent any minutes of my life on a far alt-right blog. Like, never done it. Who goes to far right, alt-right blogs? People who are interested in alt-right ideas. And if you're interested in alt-right ideas already, if you think that people of color are a scourge and they're taking they're going to ruin the white race or something like that, and you spend more time on those blogs, then you're going to come in contact with other people who feel that way. And those people are going to say these things, and the only people you're going to see are people who are saying those things. Back in the day, it was far harder to only get large numbers of people who held similar views to you. Because if I got up here in this class and started talking about like the white race or some race theory nonsense, one of you is going to pipe up and say, "Professor, that's total bullshit." But if I go on an alt-right blog and start saying this, the only other people I'm interacting with are other people who are going to believe it. Therefore, the numbers grow and people start, like, if the majority of people you've interacted with hold this view, you start being more likely to believe it. And over time, the group itself will grow. So you just need a couple people to believe it wholeheartedly, then interact with other people who are open to it. And the next thing you know, you have a huge number of people who believe something that couldn't necessarily have gotten off the ground back when it was face-to-face interaction. Now, that's not to say we haven't had conspiracy theories for a long time, but generally the quickest way to get a conspiracy theory or like just totally wrong view going is get people who are open to it just talking to other people who are open to it. And very soon you end up with some really, really crazy ideas being believed by a large number of people. So with social proof, an advertisement would use, like a way of using social proof in an advertisement to get someone to buy something is just to say like 99% of Americans believe this is the best product, or of consumers we asked, 85% say that Huggies works better than pull-ups or whatever. I don't know why I went to diapers. My mind is in a weird place. But yeah, so that would be one. Or like very often like anything you can think of an ad for, they very often say 95% of our consumers believe this, or experts believe, like 9 out of every 10 experts believes blah, blah, blah. That's what we're talking about with social proof. So those are the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any questions at this point before we move on? And again, for the ads, I'm just going to ask you, like, if there's something of somebody, like if the ad is a very pretty person saying 9 out of every 10 Americans believes that Dove make the best soap, then that would be a case of both halo effect and social proof, something like that. That's all I'd be looking for. And again, I'm not trying to trick you all with the homework. This is literally just practice not being convinced by ads. It's a good thing to practice. You end up spending less money on things you don't need.
I have a question. So,
yeah.
like, for example, with the social proof, can that same reasoning apply to like a cult, like
yes.
how it forms?
100%. Cults, and actually cults are great because they involve all of them. So in a cult, one of the major things of a cult is there's a strong emphasis on in-group versus out-group. We are good. We are the chosen. Everyone who disagrees with us is bad. You have to believe. Another major thing about a cult is if you start to stray from the cult, there is incredible pressure from within the cult to come back to thinking the correct way. And also with a cult, the number one rule is never talk to anyone outside the cult, because if you only talk to people inside the cult, then all of these people are going to tell you the same thing. So if the only people you're talking to are saying, yes, you are going to get saved by aliens, then therefore you're more likely, because everyone you're asking is you're getting saved by aliens. And actually in the reading, there was this really interesting case. I recommend it just for just your own interests. But they talked about, there was a psych study of one of these apocalyptic groups that was convinced the world was going to end on some random day. I think it was in the 70s, and that the chosen few were going to be saved by an alien spaceship that was going to land at 12 midnight and blah, blah, blah. 12 midnight rolled around. The spaceship never showed up. And everyone's, well, first off, what did you think people's response was in this case? What did they think? Did they say, yeah, you're right, we were wrong the whole time? Or what did they say, Jeff?
They probably said it was the wrong time, something like that.
So they didn't say we were totally wrong. What they said is, well, actually, we prayed so hard, the Lord decided not to end the world and the aliens didn't need to show up. So that's what they say in this case. But most interestingly, up until this point, there had been a very strong view of keeping it closed in and not having more people. But the moment that these people, like the moment the world didn't end, they immediately went public and started trying to get more and more people in their group. And the reason why was because these people, the most like logical explanation for why they suddenly wanted more people was they started to question, like, oh my God, am I wrong? Well, the best way to prove to myself that I'm not wrong is let's just get more people in the group. Because if I've got 20 million people who believe me, then it's going to be okay. Like, yeah. So that's social proof in the way that the number of people who agree with you can really boost you up. All right. The last one I want to talk about is compliance. So compliance is what? What is compliance? Or what is it to comply?
When you
doing something correctly?
Say that again.
Doing something correctly?
So it's doing something correctly. It's doing something in a way that somebody else tells you is correct. So if a business complies with Environmental Protection Agency rules, they are sticking to the rules that they were told they have to follow. It's doing those things correctly. So in a case in which, like, if you all turn in your homework by a certain time when I tell you to, like if you all turn in your homework by the end of the day Sunday, you complied with the homework assignment rules. If you don't turn it in, you did not comply. So that's compliance. And now here's an interesting, actually, we haven't actually talked about it yet. So here's the thing about human beings and compliance. It's not just that we conform to other groups. Very often, if somebody tells us we should do something, we very often just do it. If this person is what? What relation does this person have to us? An individual tells you to do something. If I
it has to be really close to you?
They have to be close to you. That's one thing. But very often, so if you trust them, But also, if I were to tell you all, like, if on the first day of school, I just said, all right, everyone, cameras on now.
No one would do it.
Some of you might actually listen to me. And why would you listen to me?
Authority?
I'm an authority figure. So this compliance with authority figures is another major social psychological factor. If an authority figure tells you to do something, very often you will do it. Now, granted, we don't do it in every case, and we only do it with certain types of authority figures. But the terrifying thing is, if an authority figure of the right sort tells you what to do, you are going to be willing to do some really terrible shit if the person in a right position of authority tells you to do it. So what I want to talk about now, how many people have heard of this? This is my favorite set, probably my favorite experiments ever in anything. They're definitely one of the most famous psychology experiments. And they're just like, the Milgram experiments are some of the greatest experiments ever done. Has anyone heard of the Milgram experiment? So basically the background of the Milgram experiment, okay, Hong's heard of it. So the Milgram experiment was basically, what it was an experiment in the 70s designed to show, or designed to test how compliant are people if authority figures tell them to do things. And specifically, will the average person do fucked up shit if an authority figure tells them to? So we're talking, I think these ideas started to come into actually, I think the experiments were conducted in the 60s. What had happened about 15 years before 1960 that people were probably interested in? What world topic happened that made people wonder, how can authority figure get normal people to do crazy stuff? What happened in the late 40s or early 40s in the world that, so the prison experiment is related to this. It's often talked about.
World War II, is it?
Yeah, World War II. Jeff, World War II, what is one of the most famous parts of World War II?
The Holocaust, no?
Yeah, the Holocaust. What happened in the Holocaust? 7 million people were killed. And 7 million people were killed. There were some, let's be very clear. There was a large number of people who had truly disturbed beliefs, but there were also a lot of people who you would ordinarily think are totally normal individuals doing some really crazy stuff. And so people came along and were like, why did this happen? So for instance, I'm going to show you some pictures, and these pictures are all going to look somewhat similar to each other. So here's a picture. I Google searched people posing on Instagram, and this is just a random photo of some people posing on Instagram, just hanging out, looking like they're having a good time. Normal people. Here's another one of just some normal, these people are just posing a little extra hard. They're all dolled up, they're Instagram models, they're doing their thing. People, they're not looking in any way abnormal. Even celebrities can do it. Here's Jennifer Aniston and her friends from Friends just posing for a photo, looking totally normal. Everyone's doing it. Here's another one. Here's a group of men and women hanging out, eating desserts, listening to music, laughing. One of these photos, however, is somewhat different than the others. Anyone know which of the photos it is?
The Instagram models?
So the Instagram models kind of stand out. These people, do these look like evil people? These random people sitting here enjoying their desserts?
They don't, but it's black and white, so.
Yeah, it's black and white. These are the guards from Auschwitz death camp.
Oh,
these are people looking like normal folks out having a good time. These were the people who literally guarded the prison camp, the death camp in World War II. They are normal looking people. And yet they did some truly terrifying looking, or they look normal, did terrifying things. So there's two things you can conclude. Either all of Germany was evil, or normal people can do fucked up stuff. And what the Milgram experiments were designed to do was test how fucked up will normal people get if you just put an authority figure and tell them to do something. And so here's how the experiment went. You invite somebody, Milgram worked at Yale. He put out an advertisement into the New Haven newspapers and put posters that just said, looking for subjects for an experiment on memory and learning. You got to the experiment and the experimenter told you, all right, here's how this is going to work. We have two people here. One of you is going to be randomly assigned to be the learner. The other is going to be the teacher. If you're the teacher, your job is to ask the learner questions. If they get it right, you just ask them another question. If they get it wrong, you apply a level of electrical shock to them. At first, the shocks will be low, but they'll get higher. If you're the learner, just answer the questions as best you can. And if you are struggling, you will get an electric shock. All right, everyone, and if you went in there, they'd be like, okay, and you are going to be the teacher. So you go and you sit down. You're on one side of a wall. So you're over here. This is you. You're sitting down or you're standing. You've got a little button which says shock. And then on the other side of the wall is somebody else who's learning. And they're going to be answering your questions. But then the key is standing next to you while you're doing it is going to be a very professional looking person in a lab coat. And this lab coat person is going to be there giving you, yeah, that's what a lab coat looks like. They're going to be telling you what to do, how to apply this. So it starts off pretty easy. The person on the other side of the wall, and this is what their shock system looks like. It looks like this. 1, 2, 4, 10, ... 150, 250, 450, X. So this person starts and they get the answer wrong and you shock them. And from the other side of the wall, you hear, ow. Then they do it again. And you ask them another one and they get it wrong. And you shock them a little harder. You move it up and you have 2 and you hear an ow. It keeps going. And by about halfway, the person on the other end is just screaming, no, please, just let me out of here. Let me out of here. Please, I want this to stop. To which you, sitting there applying the electrical shock, turn to the experimenter, and the experimenter very seriously in their white lab coat says, I'm sorry, but the experiment must continue. To which you go to the next level. You ask them, they get it wrong. By this point, the person is just screaming on the other end of the wall. Just, oh my God, pounding on the wall, screaming, please stop. By the time you get to 250, 450, the person has gone totally silent on the other end of the wall. You ask the question, no response. And you ask the experimenter, do I shock them? The experimenter says, yes, the experiment must proceed. That's the experiment. In this context, what percentage of people do you think went all the way to the XXX, this could kill the person? These were Americans who lived in Connecticut. The guess. So what are people's guesses? What percentage of people went all the way?
It was probably low.
We like to think it was like 1 or so. Before they did the experiment, they asked people what they thought, and everyone thought it was going to be 1, 2%. The answer, 67% of people went all the way. Here, just as terrifyingly, 100% of people went past the point at which the person started begging, please stop. These were not terrible people. These were average people in Connecticut who were just chosen for a lab. Now, here's the background. Was anyone actually getting shocked? No, the person on the other side of the wall was an actor. No one was actually harmed. But this person didn't know that. And yet most people, 67% of people went all the way. So in this class, right now we have 1, 2, 3 by 4 plus 2. We have 5. We have 17 people right now. Of those 17 people, I can't do math, but if there were 18 of us, 12 would have gone all the way to applying a level of shock that would have killed someone. These were extraordinary findings that most people are willing to do something totally crazy if they are told by an authority figure to do it. And that if the authority figure keeping it very seriously. Interestingly, they did a version of the experiment in which a person, like just another Confederate. So it was basically, they said 3 people. We're going to have the teacher, the person who says keep going, and the person behind the wall. When it was another person who said, like, if it wasn't an experimenter, but it was just like another person who was actually an actor, but you thought was just chosen, if they told you to keep going, basically everyone stopped. The key is that the authority figure tells you you must keep going. And so why is it this high? It probably goes back to back in the day when we lived on the African plains, where if there was a leader of the group, and if you like went against the leader and you did something else, you put everyone's lives in danger. So if like you have the alpha male and the alpha female of the group and they say we're going here and somebody goes another way, you're down one person, you might not have a guard. And this is why in an army situation, what's the number one worst thing you can do as a soldier? Like, what is the thing that's going to get you punished faster and harder than anything else in the army?
To not comply?
No, vain, yeah.
Yeah, if you don't follow orders. In the army, killing civilians is very much frowned upon. But there have been many instances of people who have killed civilians and not gotten in trouble for it. If you don't follow orders, though, that is like the number one no-no. Why? Because when everyone's life is on the line in an army situation, disobeying the authority figure has exact consequences. So in the same way, back in the day on the plains, it was the same sort of thing. If you disobeyed the leader, everyone was in a position of in danger. But the crazy thing is those same things are operative today. So the number one takeaway from the Milgram experiment was people were expecting like there must have just been something crazy about the Germans in World War II that led them to this. And now you could argue that probably given the culture of Germany at the time and the fact that their economy was falling apart and various other things, they were feeling more in-group preference and more out-group preference for people like of Jewish descent or people who were out-group in other ways. So you might say that they would be more compliant than the average American. But even the most freedom-loving American in the 1960s had just seen World War II happen, was still 2 out of every 3 was willing to put what they thought was putting another person's life in danger. And interestingly, what they found with these studies is, you can read the notes. The experiments themselves are just absolutely fascinating. Milgram's notes on them are fascinating. But the way he described it is, there was this guy who came in, like a very well-dressed businessman, came in, and by the end of the experiment, as the teacher was just blubbering in tears, just shaking, just like couldn't even think straight, but was still continuing to give the shocks because the authority basically gave up all control over himself and was just channeling what the authority figure said. And just the degree to which, and the reason that this experiment could never happen today, because like the people who did this were really screwed up in the head after they did it. Like to learn like, oh, like the monsters aren't out there. The monsters are in here. Like I am the monster who would be willing to kill people if an authority figure told me to. And so one thing with the Milgram experiment, and the reason I like to talk about this experiment in such depth is like, until you get in that situation, you don't know if you're the 1/3 who doesn't kill somebody or the 2/3 who do. And one of the best ways to make sure you're not in that 2/3 is to know about it and think about it beforehand. And I don't know, like, hopefully none of us are ever in this situation. And like, I sure as hell hope I'm not, and I sure as hell hope none of you are. But there are other sorts of versions where like, if your boss tells you to do something screwed up, the fact that your boss told you to do it is very often going to push you towards doing it. But just because the boss said it, and a lot of the reason why it's so powerful is we can put the blame onto someone else. So if you do the screwed up thing, you just be like, well, it's really my boss. He's the one who made the decision. And then the boss will say, well, my boss told me I had to do it. And then the CEO will say, well, I needed to do it for the shareholders. So everyone blames everyone else. And if you keep passing the buck, then what ends up happening is people end up doing crazy, crazy things and nobody feels bad about it. So that's the most extreme case. Hopefully you never have an advertisement that's telling you to like kill someone. But the same sorts of things can be seen in ads. And this is also one of the reasons why appeals to authority arguments seem so appealing. And part of the reason they seem appealing is because we have this internal thought process of, well, if the authority figure said it, I need to go along with it. So if you've seen an ad, like an actual authority figure saying you should do this, like a politician says you should buy this car, well, that's a case in which they're trying to use compliance against you to get you to purchase something you don't need. All right, I've got nothing else that I want to say. Does anyone have any other questions about Milgram or anything else? I will briefly mention the prison experiment if people want me to. because that came up in chat. So the way the prison experiment worked, it's another case in which, so the Milgram experiment was designed to show that people are willing to do screwed up stuff, and if an authority figure tells them to. The prison experiment, what it showed is that people start acting in the ways they think they're supposed to act, even if the ways they're supposed to act are really screwed up. And so the way the prison experiment worked was this guy Zimbardo out at Stanford decided that he was going to set up a fake prison. And in this fake prison, he was going to have a lot of subjects come in. Half of them were going to be assigned to a prison guard role. Half of them were going to be assigned to a prisoner role. Now, to be clear, neither of these groups had actually done anything wrong. Nobody, it was randomly chosen people from the community. None of them had committed a crime. It was literally just they were going to act out living in a prison. And what ended up happening is, most famously, the experiment had to be stopped after 2 weeks. It was supposed to run for a whole month. Why did it have to get stopped after 2 weeks? Anyone have any ideas? What started happening?
The officers, well, the pretend officers started acting like they were superior and treating the prisoners wrong.
Yeah, the people who were the fake officers, the people who were randomly chosen to be officers, started beating the prisoners, like literally hitting them with sticks and treating them like they were lesser people. Why? Because they literally embodied the role of the prison guards super hard, started treating the in-group as good, the prisoners as bad. They were the out-group, they were bad. And so Zimbardo, like somebody found out and they just had to pull the plug on it. And they were like, this can't continue. Interestingly, Zimbardo was not the one who pulled the plug. He wanted the experiment to keep going. He's an interesting guy in many ways. I've seen interviews with him and it's kind of like, oh, it's very clear that I see why you were in charge of this experiment, you like evil mastermind. But that was the prison experiment, was just a case in which is another social psych experiment where it's not just you do crazy stuff when an authority figure tells you to, it's rather if you think you are supposed to act in a certain way, you start acting in a certain way. And so this has a lot of cases to go on, like you can come up with cases of, I mean, this sort of, you should act this way, you act this way because you should. I'm sure there's been some work, I'm not familiar with.
Like the past 4 years?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's been some work on it in the past few years about, for, you know, obvious reasons. Why is it that people start acting in this way? Well, because they think they should, and they don't even realize that they are in a lot of cases. Like, and the interesting thing is that if in the interviews with the guards, they started, like, they explained that they thought the prisoners deserved it. And it's not just that these were just ordinary people off the streets, but in the minds of the guard, they literally started thinking this way. And in their own minds, the prisoners had to follow their rules. And because they didn't, they deserved to be hit. And this is the amazing thing, is just the way in which you not only start to act in certain ways, you start to think in the ways that go along with your behaviors. Which actually, just to finish off, there's another thing that I want to talk about here with this, which is called cognitive dissonance. How many people have heard this, cognitive dissonance? This is the last thing we'll talk about.
I've heard of it, but I don't remember what it is.
So what cognitive...
I think they use it in marketing, something like that.
So the basic idea, yeah, they use it in a lot of different things, but the basic idea with cognitive dissonance is, here's a question. You've got, does Baruch even have sororities and fraternities? I don't actually know.
Have like,
yeah, I think they do.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's definitely not like a major part of the culture. So here's the thing though. Like imagine an imaginary big state school where the sorority, so everyone know how this works. Like start of the semester, you decide like, I'm going to be a part of a sorority. And what happens? How do you like become a part of a sorority? Well, you have to go through like a little like interview process. And the interview process is basically do a bunch of crazy screwed up stuff. And if you do it well, we'll let you into the sorority. So some of them are really mundane and others are like really, really horrible. So as a matter of fact, some of them have literally involved like sexual abuse. Some of them have involved literal, like you have to do like physically damage yourself. And so imagine you've got two imaginary sororities. In one of these sororities, you have to, the way you get in the sorority is you write a funny haiku That's all you have to do. Haiku, just like a short little poem. The other one, you have to whip yourself with a bramble bush. Like it's a big needly bush, and you just whip yourself over the back and bleed. If you ask these people in 2 years, which group do you think loves their sorority more and is more willing to donate money to the sorority after they graduate? Anyone have any ideas? The ones who wrote a poem or the ones who whipped themselves until they bled?
Probably the ones who beat themselves almost to death.
Yeah,
I think.
The ones who almost beat themselves to death are going to donate more money in the future and are more likely to say, yes, I loved this group. Why? Anyone know why they say this?
Maybe because they went through pain. So they actually, I don't know, they think more of it. It's more important to them.
So there's the key. What Jeff just pointed out at the end. The reason is this person has to justify to themselves why they did this truly fucked up thing. And if you wrote a poem, you're like, that's not that bad, whatever. Like, it's kind of cool. But if you beat yourself for a goal, then you have to convince yourself the reason you beat yourself was worth it. And so that's what cognitive dissonance is this way of justifying your behaviors after the fact to make yourself not look like a monster or to make yourself look like what you did was worth it. So in this case, with the prison experiment, the part of the reason the guards explained this is they started acting in screwed up ways. And they were like, well, at this point, either I'm a terrible person who beats people who don't deserve it, or this person deserved to be beat. One of these makes me out to be a monster. I don't want to be a monster. Therefore, the prisoner must have deserved it. So cognitive dissonance is one of the most powerful mechanisms in our mind. And generally people will do very often, this is another reason why people are very unlikely to give up on their apocalyptic beliefs in cults. Like your options are either you keep believing that the world is going to end, or you gave up your entire life for no good reason. And so you have to just keep believing. And so cognitive dissonance is one of the reasons it's so hard for people to change their minds. Also, cognitive dissonance is part of the reason why it's very hard to change the views of extreme racism. If you're somebody who grew up beating up, if you were to take a concrete example, if you're a white person who lives down in Alabama and spent your childhood beating up Black people, by the time you get to age 30, you have two choices. Either Black people are lesser humans who deserve to be beaten, or you spent your childhood doing terrible, terrible things. And most people don't want to confront the fact that they did monstrous things. So we're going to double down and say, and therefore these people deserved it. So that's another reason cognitive dissonance is always why it's so hard to explain and why it's very difficult to get people who behave badly to confront the fact that they behaved badly. All right, that ran a little long on random social psychology topics. I think social psych's one of the most fascinating areas in anything. So if anyone ever wants to talk to me about it, feel free. But that's it for tonight. Again, the homework's just going to be find me 4 ads in which some of these things are being used. I will talk to you all next week, and I will post the homework assignment tomorrow morning. Have a good evening, everyone.
Perfect.